The church bells had barely finished ringing when the crowd outside froze. A jet-black Rolls-Royce Phantom purred up the driveway, gleaming under the Georgia sun like a predator. The chauffeur stepped out, crisp gloves tugged tight, and opened the back door. Gasps rippled through the wedding guests. Eleanor Brooks, the ex-wife Marcus Kane had invited to mock, stepped out in a fitted cream dress that caught every ray of light. But what silenced the courtyard wasn't just her calm smile. It was the three little boys who clung to her hands, dressed in matching navy suits, eyes wide with innocence. Phones lifted. The bridesmaids stared. Marcus himself went pale at the altar. He had planned for Elena to show up broken, small, humiliated. Instead, she arrived radiant, regal, and flanked by three children who looked uncannily alike. Triplets. And that was only the beginning. The music inside the church stumbled when the Rolls-Royce appeared, and though the band tried to recover, the uneasy notes only made the hush heavier. Guests shifted in their chairs, eyes darting from the altar to the driveway. Marcus Kane, the man everyone had gathered to celebrate, stood with his hands clasped, forcing a smile that didn't fit his face. His bride-to-be, Amber Collins, leaned toward him, whispering something through clenched teeth. He didn't hear her. His eyes were locked on Elena. Elena walked with unhurried grace. Every step carried weight, as though she wasn't entering Marcus's wedding, but claiming a stage that had always been waiting for her. The three boys stayed close, holding on to her, curious but fearless. Their suits, though small, had been tailored, the kind of care that said their mother wanted them to walk into the world already respected. Cameras flashed. One of the boys tugged at Elena's dress and pointed at the cake through the window. She bent down, whispered something that made him smile, then straightened again, her eyes sliding across the courtyard until they met Marcus's. For a second that stretched like glass, neither moved. Marcus had always been a man who thrived on power. The boardroom, the dealership, the social circles where everyone watched what he drove, what he wore, who he dined with. Elena had once been part of that world. She had been his wife, the woman who stood by his side in photographs, her smile softer, her presence less rehearsed than his. But for years, she had also been the quiet bruise on his ego. 7 years of marriage had given him wealth, houses, luxury vacations, but not a single child. Marcus blamed Elena for every barren test, every disappointed phone call from his mother, every laugh from friends who bragged about their toddlers. He had turned their home into a courtroom where every evening was another trial of her worth. One night, after yet another appointment that ended with the doctor's polite apology, Marcus had exploded. He came home, threw his keys across the marble counter, and paced like a lion in a cage. 7 years, Elena, he shouted, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. 7 years and still nothing. Do you want me to die with no air? Do you want people to laugh at me forever? Elena had sat on the edge of their bed, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles whitened. Marcus, we've tried. I've tried. Maybe we should see another doctor. Maybe there's still hope. Hope! His laugh was sharp, bitter. You think hope will give me a son? My friends ask when they'll meet my boy. My mother calls every week to remind me what kind of man can't produce an heir. And what do I have to show them? You. Tears had welled in Elena's eyes. I am your wife. We made vows. Marcus. For better. For worse. I have stood by you. But you treat me as if I am nothing. He had pointed at her, his voice rising with venom. Because you are nothing to me now. What is a woman who can't bear children? You eat my food. You wear my clothes. You ride in my car. And you still give me nothing. The words shattered her. For years she had endured his coldness, his subtle jabs at dinner parties, his mother's thinly veiled insults. But that night stripped the last piece of her dignity. She didn't scream. She didn't throw anything back. She just sat there, silent, her tears falling onto her lap. By morning, she was gone. She left the mansion quietly, carrying only a suitcase, leaving behind the life of diamonds and luxury cars for a small apartment across town. Atlanta's skyline looked different through the window of that tiny place, less glamorous, more human. She took a job teaching music to children at a community center, her fingers on the piano keys once again, her voice guiding small choirs. The world judged her. Whispers about Marcus's barren wife, gossip about how she had failed him. But Elena built something else in the silence he left behind. And now, 7 years later, she had walked into his wedding with 3 boys who called her Mom. The courtyard was still buzzing, the whispers running like wildfire. "Are they hers?" one woman hissed to another. "Where did they come from? Did she remarry? Are they adopted?" The questions multiplied, but the answers stayed locked in Elena's calm smile. Amber tugged on Marcus's arm. "Who are those kids?" she demanded, her voice sharp enough for nearby guests to hear. Marcus didn't answer. He couldn't. His mind was unraveling. He had imagined Elena arriving pitiful, maybe in an old dress, maybe sitting alone in the back row with tears in her eyes. He had scripted her humiliation as the final flourish to his triumph. Instead, the humiliation was his. The youngest boy suddenly called out, his voice innocent, cutting through the tension like a blade. "Mom, are we late for cake?" The crowd erupted into uneasy laughter, not at Elena, but at the absurdity of the moment. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. Elena crouched down, kissed the boy's cheek, and answered softly, "No, sweetheart, we're right on time." The band picked up again, trying to mask the electricity in the air, but the damage was done. Marcus's carefully constructed image, the powerful businessman, the victorious groom, the man who had traded his barren past for a fertile future, had cracked, and everyone in Atlanta high society would be talking about it by nightfall. Elena led her boys to a bench under a sprawling oak tree at the edge of the courtyard. They sat close to her, whispering, laughing quietly among themselves. From across the yard, camera phones zoomed in, capturing the moment. Elena glowing softly in the Georgia sun, 3 small heads nestled against her shoulders. That picture would spread before the wedding was even over. Each repost another nail in Marcus Kane's ego. Marcus tried to continue the ceremony. He lifted Amber's hand, forced a smile, and nodded to the priest, but his eyes kept straying to Elena. The triplets, their uncanny resemblance, their calm presence that screamed louder than his entire fortune. Something inside him, brittle and furious, snapped. He raised his champagne glass when the best man called for a toast. His voice, meant to sound confident, trembled just enough to betray him. "We all know who used to..." He stopped mid-sentence. He had planned a cruel joke at Elena's expense, a final dagger, but the words dried up. All he could see was her smile, and the 3 pairs of innocent eyes staring back at him. The guests waited, glasses half raised. Marcus fumbled, cleared his throat, and forced out something hollow. To new beginnings." The crowd clinked glasses, but the energy had shifted. Elena had stolen it without even trying. As the night deepened, the whispers refused to die. Some guests approached Elena, offering polite words that were less about curiosity and more about awe. Amber excused herself to the bridal suite twice, her face red with frustration. And Marcus? He kept glancing at his own reflection in the glossy surface of his limousine, as if trying to convince himself he was still in control. But the truth was already written on every guest's face. Marcus Kane had not won. And what Elena carried, the story of those 3 boys, the life she had built in silence, was only just beginning to unfold. The camera of our story lingers on Marcus's clenched jaw, then shifts to Elena beneath the oak, smiling softly as one of her sons leans against her shoulder. Then freeze frame. The screen freezes on Elena's calm smile at the wedding, her 3 boys pressed close to her beneath the oak tree. Then the narration pulls us backward, peeling away the layers of the present to reveal what really happened during the 7 years she had vanished from Marcus Kane's life. The night Elena left Marcus's mansion, Atlanta was drenched in rain. The Kane estate, with its iron gates and marble pillars, stood behind her like a fortress that had swallowed 7 years of her youth. Her suitcase wheels rattled on the wet pavement as she dragged them toward a waiting taxi. She didn't look back. She couldn't. If she turned, the weight of what she was leaving might crush her. The cab driver asked no questions. Elena sat in the back, rain streaking down the windows, clutching her purse as if it contained her last breath. Inside it was little more than a few $100s in savings, a passport, and the folded wedding photograph she hadn't yet found the courage to throw away. She moved into a cramped apartment in the southern side of Atlanta, where the streetlights flickered and the walls carried the smell of other people's lives. The place was one room with peeling wallpaper and a window that barely opened, but it was hers. No marble floors, no luxury cars in the driveway, no voices reminding her that she was a failure. Just silence. For weeks, Elena walked the city like a ghost. She took a job teaching piano at a community center, the kind with donated instruments and children who came barefoot sometimes, their laughter filling the cracks of the building. The first time she pressed her hands against the keys in front of those kids, she cried. Not because she was sad, but because the sound reminded her that beauty could still exist without wealth, without approval, without Marcus. She ate cheap meals, stretched every dollar, and learned how to fix her own broken sink with YouTube tutorials. At night, when loneliness pressed hardest, she would whisper prayers into the darkness, not for Marcus, not for the life she'd lost, but for the strength to carry her forward. And then, one morning, her life cracked open in a way she never expected. It was late spring when Elena first heard the cries. She was walking home from the grocery store, a paper bag of canned beans and bread under her arm, when she passed a church on the corner of Auburn Avenue. The cries were faint, almost swallowed by the hum of traffic, but they pulled her to the side alley. There, tucked in an old wicker basket beneath the church steps, lay 3 infants. Her first thought was that she was hallucinating. She dropped her bag, cans rolling across the pavement, and fell to her knees. 3 babies, tiny and fragile, swaddled in mismatched blankets. Their faces were nearly identical, their cries harmonizing in heartbreaking rhythm. Elena's hands shook as she lifted one, then another, then touched the third. A note was pinned to the side of the basket, written in hurried scrawl. "I cannot keep them. Please, and whoever finds them, give them a chance." She stood frozen, heart hammering, the world tilting around her. The easy choice would have been to call the police, to let the system take them. But as one baby's small fingers curled tightly around hers, Elena felt something surge inside her, something she had begged for in vain during those 7 years of emptiness. She whispered through her tears, "You're mine now, all of you." From that day forward, Elena's life transformed. It wasn't easy. Nothing about raising 3 infants in a one-room apartment was easy. Nights were sleepless, days were a blur of bottles and diapers, and her savings vanished faster than she could count. But every struggle was laced with a strange joy. Where Marcus had once accused her of being nothing, these 3 little souls looked at her as if she were everything. The community center rallied around her. Volunteers brought formula, neighbors dropped off used cribs, and the pastor at the church where she had found the babies visited weekly to check in. Atlanta's gossip had long dismissed Elena as Marcus's barren ex-wife, but in her small corner of the city, she became known as the piano teacher with the miracle triplets. Years passed. The boys grew. Their names, Noah, Nathan, and Nicholas, became music in her home. They learned to walk together, stumbled together, laughed in unison. Elena juggled lessons and side jobs, sometimes cleaning houses, sometimes selling baked goods, anything to keep food on the table. She wore second-hand clothes and cut her own hair, But her children wore pride like a crown. And slowly, as the triplets filled her world, Elena herself transformed. She was no longer the woman who had begged Marcus to see her worth. She was no longer the wife waiting for permission to exist. She had built a life out of nothing, and it glowed brighter than all of Marcus's chandeliers. The narrator's voice dips lower. But secrets never stay buried, and Atlanta is a city that thrives on secrets. Because the truth about the triplets wasn't as simple as Elena wanted to believe. One evening, as the boys approached their 6th birthday, a letter arrived. It was slipped under her apartment door. No return address, no stamp. The envelope was cream, the handwriting elegant, deliberate. Inside, a single line. You cannot hide them forever. Blood will always call to blood. Elna froze, the paper trembling in her hand. Her eyes darted to the boys, who were sprawled on the floor with their toy cars, laughing. She clutched the letter to her chest, her mind racing. Who had left them in that basket all those years ago? And who was watching them now? Back at the wedding, the camera cuts to Marcus Kane, sweat beating at his temple, eyes darting between the triplets and Elena. He didn't know their story yet. He didn't know the nights of struggle, the miracles, the letter. But something in his gut told him the boys weren't just a symbol of Elena's resilience. They were a threat. The narrator's voice rises again. Marcus Kane thought he had buried his past. He thought Elena Brooks would remain a silent scar. But those 3 boys carried a truth deeper than he could imagine. A truth that could destroy everything he had built. The camera zooms on Marcus's clenched jaw, then on Elena's calm, defiant eyes as she pulls her sons close. The night of Marcus Kane's wedding reception dragged on, but no amount of champagne could wash away the unease burning inside him. The chandeliers glittered, the jazz band played, guests clinked glasses, yet Marcus's mind was elsewhere. His smile cracked every time his gaze fell on the oak tree outside, where Elena Brooks sat with her 3 boys, their laughter like a song he could not silence. Amber, his bride, whispered furiously in his ear, Marcus, you're ruining this. Everyone's talking about her. Why did you even invite her? He forced his lips into a smirk, though his eyes betrayed him. I wanted her to see what she lost, he muttered. Amber scoffed. Well, congratulations. You look like the one who lost. The words sliced deep, because Marcus knew she was right. He had orchestrated this day to cement his triumph, but Elena had walked in and stolen the stage without even trying. And the boys, those boys, their faces haunted him, the way their eyes glimmered, the curve of their chins, the sharpness of their jawlines. Something about them looked familiar. The morning after, Marcus sat in his office downtown, staring at his reflection in the floor-to-ceiling glass. The city of Atlanta bustled beneath him, cars crawling like ants along Peachtree Street. His assistant entered with a stack of papers, but Marcus waved him away. He couldn't focus. Not on contracts, not on cars, not on anything. He pulled out his phone, zooming in on a photograph one guest had posted on social media. Elena under the oak, her triplets huddled around her. The boys' faces stared back at him through the screen. He studied them, one by one. Noah, Nathan, Nicholas. He didn't know their names yet, but their features burned into him. A memory flickered. His own childhood photographs. His mother's albums filled with pictures of a young Marcus, wide-eyed, with the same sharp jaw and crooked half-smile. His stomach twisted. It was impossible. And yet, Marcus called a private investigator that afternoon, a man named Carter Doyle, a former cop with a reputation for getting answers people didn't want to hear. They met in the corner booth of a dimly lit steakhouse. I need information, Marcus said, voice low, on Elena Brooks, where she's been the past 7 years, and on those kids. Carter raised an eyebrow. Kids? 3 boys, triplets. She calls them hers. Find out where they came from, who their father is, everything. Carter leaned back, chewing the end of his cigar. That'll cost you. Marcus slid a check across the table without blinking. I don't care. I need the truth. While Marcus set his wheels in motion, Elena's life continued quietly in her modest apartment. The boys had returned to school after the wedding weekend, their laughter echoing down the hallway. Elena watched them with a bittersweet smile, replaying the moment under the oak tree. She had seen Marcus's face, the shock, the doubt, the fear. For the first time in years, she had felt powerful in his presence, but she also knew it wouldn't last. The letter still sat in her drawer, its words haunting her. Blood will always call to blood. She hadn't told the boys where they came from. To them, she was simply Mom, the only anchor they'd ever known. But in her heart, she knew the truth would one day surface. Secrets have a way of clawing themselves into the light. 2 weeks later, Carter returned to Marcus with a file. They met again in the steakhouse, the hum of traffic outside masking their low voices. Carter slid the folder across the table. She left you with nothing, moved into a one-room apartment, taught piano at a community center, no new husband, no partner. But 7 years ago, something happened. 3 babies were left outside a church. She took them in, raised them as her own. Marcus's jaw tightened. Who left them? Carter shrugged. No one knows, no records, no names. But here's the kicker. He pulled out a photograph, a close-up of the boys at a school event. He tapped the page. That one, the oldest looking, he's the spitting image of you. Marcus's breath caught. He snatched the photograph, studying it. The boy's eyes, his eyes, the curve of his mouth, identical to his own school portrait. This is impossible, Marcus whispered. I never. He trailed off, mind racing. Could it be? Had Elena somehow hidden a child from him? Or was it a cruel coincidence? Carter smirked. You want me to dig deeper? DNA doesn't lie. Marcus nodded slowly, his hand trembling as he folded the photograph. Do whatever it takes. That night, Marcus drove past Elena's neighborhood, his luxury car out of place among the modest buildings. He parked across the street and watched as Elena came home with the boys. They ran ahead of her, backpacks bouncing, laughter spilling into the air. Elena followed, holding groceries, her shoulders tired but her face peaceful. Marcus gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles whitened. This wasn't the life he had imagined for her. Small, simple, but undeniably full. He had mocked her for being barren. Yet here she was, mother to 3 boys who filled her world with joy. And him? He had wealth, status, a new bride who already looked at him with contempt. But no child, no heir. For the first time, Marcus felt envy, not of another man's fortune, but of Elena's quiet happiness. Weeks passed, and Carter returned with results. He placed a sealed envelope on Marcus's desk. I got what you wanted. Marcus tore it open, his eyes devouring the page. His hands shook. DNA analysis, probability of paternity. For one of the boys, 99.9%. Marcus's vision blurred. The words screamed at him. He was the father. His mind reeled. How? He thought back to those years of empty doctor visits, of accusations, of rage. All along, he had blamed Elena. But if this boy was his, then he was never the barren one. It was Marcus. It had always been Marcus who had failed. His cruelty, his arrogance, his mother's endless blame. All of it rested on a lie he had told himself. He slammed his fist onto the desk, the photograph crumpling under his palm. The camera lingers on Marcus's face, sweat dripping, eyes wild. Then it cuts to Elena, tucking her sons into bed, humming softly as they drifted to sleep. Her world was fragile but whole, built on love. The narrator's voice cuts through. The truth Marcus had uncovered was only the beginning, because the secret of one child's blood was tied to something far darker. A betrayal buried deep, waiting to shatter not only Marcus Kane's empire, but Elena's fragile peace. The final shot freezes on the DNA report in Marcus's trembling hands. The words probability of paternity, 99.9%, burned across the screen. The envelope lay open on Marcus Kane's mahogany desk, its words burning into his mind. Probability of paternity, 99.9%. His breath came in shallow bursts, his heart a drum inside his chest. The city glittered outside his penthouse windows, but all Marcus could see was the face of a boy who shared his blood, the boy who should have been his heir. For years, Marcus had lived in the shadow of humiliation, whispered jokes, his mother's accusations, his friends' smirks. He had carried it like a curse, lashing out at Elena, convincing himself it was her fault. But now the truth struck him like lightning. It had never been her. It had always been him. He slammed his fist against the desk, the whiskey glass tipping over, amber liquid spreading across the DNA report. His reflection in the glass wall glared back at him. Powerful, wealthy, dressed in the finest suit, yet hollow. Amber entered the room without knocking, her heels clicking against the hardwood. "You've been hiding in here for hours," she said, irritation sharp in her tone. "What's so important that you can't even come to bed?" Marcus shoved the papers into a drawer, but not quickly enough. Amber's eyes caught the edge of the report. "What is that?" she demanded. "Nothing," Marcus snapped. Amber folded her arms. "Don't lie to me. Is this about her? About Elena and those kids?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "Drop it." Amber leaned closer, her perfume thick in the air. "I won't be made a fool. Marcus, people are already whispering that those boys look like you. If you're hiding something—" "I said drop it." His voice roared through the penthouse, startling even himself. Amber's eyes widened, then narrowed. She turned on her heel, slamming the door behind her. Marcus sank back into his chair, dragging his hands down his face. He knew this secret would not stay buried. If Amber suspected, others would too. And when the world discovered that the child he had rejected was his own, his empire would crumble. 3 nights later, Marcus couldn't resist any longer. He drove again to Elena's neighborhood, parking in the shadows across from her apartment. The triplets' laughter spilled out from the windows, warm and unguarded. He sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel, watching. Finally, he got out. His polished shoes clicked against the cracked sidewalk as he approached the door. For a moment, he hesitated, hand hovering over the doorbell. Then he pressed it. The door opened slowly. Elena stood there in a simple sweater, her hair tied back. No diamonds, no makeup, yet more radiant than he remembered. Her eyes widened when she saw him. "Marcus!" Her voice was steady, but her grip on the door tightened. "Elena," he said, his throat dry. "We need to talk." She glanced behind her. The boys' voices echoed down the hallway. She stepped outside, closing the door behind her. "There's nothing left to say," she whispered. "Yes, there is." Marcus's voice cracked with urgency. "Those boys, at least one of them. He's mine." Elena's face went pale. For a moment, silence hung between them, heavy as stone. "You had no right," she hissed. "No right to dig into our lives. I protected them. I gave them a home when no one else would." "They're my blood," Marcus snapped. "Do you understand what that means? I spent years thinking I was cursed, humiliated, mocked. All that time, I thought you were the barren one. And now," her eyes blazed. "And now what? Marcus? Now you think you can walk back in and claim them? After you destroyed me? After you threw me away like trash because I couldn't give you a child?" Marcus faltered. Her words cut deeper than he expected. "I was wrong," he admitted, his voice trembling. "I was blind, arrogant. But Elena, I have a right to my son." "You have no right," she shot back. "A father isn't the man who donates blood. A father is the one who stays, who loves, who sacrifices. You forfeited that right the night you called me nothing." The door behind her creaked open. Noah, the boy who looked most like Marcus, peeked out, rubbing his eyes. "Mom, who is that?" Elena's breath caught. She knelt, brushing her son's hair back. "Go inside, sweetheart. It's just an old friend." Noah glanced at Marcus, curiosity flickering in his young eyes. Something in Marcus's chest twisted. For the first time, he saw not just a child, but his child. Elena ushered Noah back inside, then turned back to Marcus, her voice low and firm. "Stay away from us. If you truly care, if you have even a shred of remorse, you'll let us live in peace." Marcus clenched his fists. He wanted to argue, to demand, to shout, but the look in Elena's eyes stopped him. It wasn't fear, it was strength, the kind he had never recognized before. He left without another word, but as he drove back through the city, his mind boiled. He couldn't walk away. Not now. The next morning, headlines exploded across Atlanta's tabloids. "Are Cain's heirs already born? Rumors swirl about ex-wife's triplets." Marcus slammed the newspaper onto his desk. Amber stormed into his office, waving her phone. "So it's true. Everyone's saying one of those boys is yours. Did you think you could hide this from me?" "Amber, don't you dare," she spat. "I didn't marry you to be humiliated. If this ruins your image, it ruins mine too. Fix it, Marcus, or I will." Marcus's world spiraled. Investors called with questions. His mother left furious voicemails. And through it all, the DNA report burned in his drawer. That evening, Marcus returned once more to Elena's apartment, desperation etched into his face. She opened the door, already weary of the fight. "What do you want now?" she asked. "I want to make this right," he said, his voice softer than she expected. "Not for me, for him, for all of them. They deserve better than this. Chaos." Elena shook her head. "Better than chaos, Marcus. They have better. They have love. They have a mother who would give up everything for them. You can't buy that." "You never could." Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Let me be part of their lives. I'll support them, protect them. Elena cut him off. "And when Amber finds out, when your empire starts to crack, will you still claim them? Or will you abandon them the moment it costs you too much?" Marcus had no answer. Elena's eyes softened, but her voice stayed firm. "You're too late, Marcus. You can't rewrite the past. And if you try to take them from me," her voice broke, then steadied, "I will fight you with everything I have." Marcus stared at her, rage and regret twisting inside him. For once, he didn't feel powerful. He felt cornered. The camera lingers on his face as he walks away into the night, the weight of the choice pressing down on him. Narrator's voice. Marcus Cain had uncovered the truth, but truth alone does not set a man free. Now he faced a decision that could cost him his empire, his marriage, and the last shred of dignity he possessed. And Elena, she would not surrender without a battle. The final shot freezes on the boys' faces at the window, watching Marcus's car disappear into the dark. Atlanta woke restless. The tabloids scream from every corner. Cain dynasty in crisis, ex-wife's triplets tied to CEO. Headlines sprawled across breakfast counters. Talk shows debated. Investors whispered in back rooms. Marcus Cain's name, once synonymous with power, cars, and wealth, was now tethered to scandal. In his penthouse, Marcus paced like a caged animal. Amber hurled a magazine across the room. "This is it. Marcus, if you don't crush her, you lose everything." His mother's voice screeched over the phone. "Those children are a stain. Elena made you a fool. And now the whole city knows. You must take them from her. Claim them, or you'll be remembered as weak." Marcus slammed the phone down, his jaw clenched. Everyone demanded the same thing: destroy Elena, reclaim the boys, salvage the Cain legacy. But in the silence that followed, a different voice echoed, the laugh of his son, the one who looked so painfully like him. 2 days later, the battle went public. Marcus filed a petition in court demanding paternity rights. Cameras swarmed the courthouse steps, reporters jostling for sound bites. Amber stood by his side, her smile tight, her grip on his arm more like a claw. Elena arrived separately, her 3 boys in tow, their small hands gripping hers. She wore no jewels, no designer dress, only the quiet dignity that had always unnerved Marcus more than any fortune. The crowd gasped as they saw her, the barren wife who now stood mother to 3, facing down the man who had once called her nothing. Inside the courtroom, the air was heavy. The judge banged the gavel, but whispers still crawled through the gallery. Marcus's lawyer rose first, thundering about bloodlines and inheritance rights. He painted Marcus as a man denied his rightful legacy, deceived by a woman who had kept his child hidden. Then Elena's turn came. She stood without notes, her voice steady. "A father," she said, "is not proven by a piece of paper or a strand of DNA. A father is proven by love, by presence, by sacrifice. For 7 years, I raised these boys alone. I fed them when I had nothing. I sang them to sleep when the world was cruel. Marcus Kane is not their father. He is a man who abandoned his family when it was hardest to stay." Gasps filled the courtroom. Marcus's face darkened, but his eyes flickered, because deep down, he knew every word was true. The trial stretched into days. Witnesses came, neighbors who spoke of Elena's devotion, teachers who testified about the boy's joy, community workers who told stories of her sacrifices. Marcus countered with his empire, his money, his promises of opportunity. But each time he spoke, the jury's eyes drifted toward Elena, toward the 3 boys sitting quietly, their small faces full of confusion and trust. One evening, after a long day in court, Marcus found himself parked again outside Elena's apartment. The boys were visible through the window, chasing each other, laughter spilling into the street. Marcus leaned back in his seat, exhausted. For the first time in years, tears burned his eyes. He whispered to himself, "What have I done?" The climax came on the final day of trial. The judge, stern and unmoved, prepared to deliver a ruling. Marcus stood, shoulders rigid, Amber gripping his arm like a vice. Elena stood opposite, the boys beside her. Before the judge could speak, Noah, the boy who carried Marcus's blood, stepped forward. His small voice carried through the hushed courtroom. "Your Honor, he said, "my mom is my mom. She's always been there. I don't need another dad. I just need her." The room broke into stunned silence. Even the judge paused, her gavel frozen midair. Marcus's chest heaved. That one simple truth, spoken from the mouth of a child, shattered every defense he had built. Amber turned on him, hissing, "Do something!" But Marcus couldn't move. For the first time, he saw the wreckage of his pride laid bare. The judge finally spoke. "This court recognizes Ms. Elena Brooks as the legal guardian and sole parent of the minors in question. Mr. Kane, your petition is denied." The gavel struck. The sound echoed like thunder. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, cameras flashing. Elena shielded her boys, guiding them through the crowd. Marcus emerged moments later, Amber storming ahead, her fury visible to all. The cameras captured everything: Elena's calm, Marcus's hollow stare, the boys' laughter despite the chaos. By nightfall, the images flooded social media. The narrative was clear. The billionaire had lost not only in court, but in the court of public opinion. Back in his penthouse, Marcus poured himself another drink. Amber packed her things in the bedroom, slamming drawers, muttering curses. His mother's calls went unanswered. For the first time, Marcus was alone, truly alone. He picked up the crumpled photograph of Noah from Carter's file, smoothing the creases. The boy's eyes stared back at him. So familiar, so haunting. Marcus whispered into the empty room. I'm sorry. Across town, Elna tucked the boys into bed. She kissed each forehead, whispering blessings, her heart lighter than it had been in years. At the window, she looked out at the city, her eyes steady. She had fought, and she had won. Sometimes, the richest man in the room is the poorest in love. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Hit that notification bell so you never miss the next tale of truth, betrayal, and redemption.